I'm of the opinion that Tetris might just be the most perfect computer game to ever exist, and I say this as someone who has never gotten addicted to it or ever been very good at it, as this video will show. Tetris is one of those games that people take for granted, I think. You'll regularly find people talking about how it's one of the greatest games ever made, but few talk about why, perhaps because it's so obvious. I'm probably not going to blow anyone's mind in this video, but I feel it's valuable to point out how perfect this game is, and why that's the case. This might be the only game where an introduction is unnecessary, but I'll do a brief one anyway. In Tetris, players control blocks falling down a playing field, and they have to slot those blocks together to form lines. Forming a line clears out the blocks and moves everything down a row so more lines can be formed. If the blocks stack high enough to touch the top of the screen, it's game over. That's the entire premise, so immediately it becomes clear that simplicity is something the game excels at. It's not a complicated premise at all, and even people who regularly avoid most computer games have found themselves drawn to Tetris, maybe because it's so easy to understand and play. In this video I'm playing the Game Boy version since it's probably the most iconic version, and it's the point where Tetris really exploded into mainstream culture. It became so popular it was attributed to the success of the Game Boy itself. It was bundled with the machine and as a result sold somewhere over 30 million copies. In the decades following, it's sold countless more, probably becoming the best-selling computer game of all time. It's been able to achieve such success because the concept of Tetris is universal, and I mean that in a literal sense. If aliens were to land on Earth tomorrow and were curious about what kind of computer games we have, they'd probably have the easiest time understanding Tetris to begin with. Even most simple arcade games of the past have a human layer of culture to them. For example, the ghosts in Pac-Man are a concept which might not necessarily exist for other civilizations. If you don't know what ghosts are, then you won't know to avoid them at the start of a game of Pac-Man. There's no cultural references or barriers in Tetris at all. It contains no story, and in a sense there's nothing specifically human about it. It's just blocks falling into place. In fact, given the vast nature of the universe, I'd go as far as to say Tetris has probably been invented independently somewhere else out there, or will be at some point in the future. It's just that perfect. So what makes Tetris perfect then? Well, mainly it's very hard to take out any singular piece of it and still have a functional or interesting game. If you remove the ability to rotate pieces, then the game won't work at all. If you don't randomize them, then people will just learn a pattern to break the game. If you don't provide a scoring system, then there's no reason to keep people coming back. If the gravity acted independently on each block, then there would be no way for the player to lose. If you don't continue to speed up the game, then there's nothing to challenge the player. The formula can certainly be tweaked a little, as countless different versions of the game show. The Game Boy version here has a window showing the next piece so a player can plan ahead. Newer versions sometimes show several pieces in advance. A hold section can also be used in most versions to save a critical piece, usually a line, for whenever it's needed. Most newer versions of the game can also perform a hard drop where the piece falls directly to the bottom of the well to increase the speed at which the player can play the game. This is sometimes assisted by a ghost piece at the bottom of the well, which allows the player to see where the piece is falling to. All of those features are in the official Tetris guidelines, but they're additions to the core gameplay rather than alterations to it. The core gameplay entirely revolves around the Tetronymos slotting into one another, and that can be done in any version of the game. Every piece in Tetris is made up of 4 blocks, hence the name of the game comes from tetra, the prefix meaning 4. Every possible Tetronymo is represented, meaning it's impossible to create a new Tetris piece. Thanks to the straight Tetronymo, it's also possible to clear a maximum of 4 lines at once. Not only are the Tetronymos a perfect set, they're also the best choice as far as I can see. Triominoes are too simplistic to result in a satisfying game. There's only 2 possible combinations. And pentominoes are the opposite, they're too complex. This isn't to say satisfying games can't be crafted with pentominoes, and I'm sure some version of Pentris exists on the internet, but the way the pieces are shaped would result in a lot of horizontal sliding, which isn't what the game was built for and is rarely necessary in Tetris. Not only that, but it would be unnecessarily off-putting anyway with such irregular shapes. Even if you disagree, Tetris, as a game about shapes made of 4 blocks, is still perfect because it can't include pentominoes without breaking its theme. Tetris is innately difficult anyway, since the increasing speed and inevitable failure always pushes the player to a point where they feel challenged, no matter what. Perhaps the most subjective aspect to Tetris is the music. It helps that the Game Boy version of the music was incredibly catchy and has become iconic by itself, but even so it simply exists as backing music. Normally I think it's important to experience every game the way it was intended, audio and all, but the music clearly isn't a very important part of the Tetris experience. Once a player plays for a while, they can substitute the music with something of their choice without detracting from the experience. Lastly, Tetris necessarily exists as a computer game. You could probably make a mechanical version of it if you really tried, but it would be a huge amount of hassle to speed the game up to a pace matching the virtual version, and it would require a lot of pieces to be on hand at any one time. It's always going to require some kind of computerized component to speed the game up and track the player's score anyway, so it might as well all be virtual. At least that way you don't have to pack away the pieces when you're done. That covers most of my main points, so to recap, Tetris has a reason to exist as a computer game instead of anything else. It uses a perfect set of components, the tetronymos, with which to build its gameplay. The core gameplay mechanics are so tightly structured that they can't be removed or altered without destroying the game. The appeal is universal and not bogged down in any kind of specific story or culture. And finally, a player is guaranteed to be challenged by it every time, since they're guaranteed to eventually lose. Many different games are declared to be amazing by various people, but how sure are we that our game of preference will be played long into the future? Not very. Games come and go, but Tetris remains the same. It's been going very strong for a very long time, for a very good reason. So if you're anything like me, and don't even personally enjoy Tetris as much as other people seem to, maybe it's time to fire it back up and see if you can at least appreciate its perfection in motion.